Welcome to the show, and welcome to this absolute mess of a room that I have here now. This room is now, I don't even know how many purposes it has. It's my music room, it's my recording room, it's my video room, it's my Linux and FreeBSD room, now that I'm doing a bunch of experimentation with Linux containers on BSD and BSD jails, and I've got another machine I'm going to set up with ZFS. By the way, if you have any old hard drives, I'll gladly accept them. I want to set up some huge arrays. Today, this is a political channel, though, and today what we're talking about, and we will get into technology because technology is playing a huge role in politics right now, but I want to do a quick book review of what I think is a very well-researched book. It certainly comes from a capitalist perspective, right? Which is, in my mind, a nice thing because it allows us to well, we live in capitalist society, so it allows us to dive into what's going on with capitalism. Now, let me get back to where it is. So the name of the book is What Went Wrong with Capitalism, and it's by Ruchir Sharma, and I recommend this book. And here's why I recommend it. It goes through hundreds of years of history into how government has interacted with the capitalist system. And it talks about debt, which now is prevalent across all the Western democracies. You know, there's so much government debt. It talks about Keynesism, how we pronounce it. But anyway, the concept of in difficult times, yes, perhaps have some debt, overspend in order to get back to decent times. And then when there are decent times, you squirrel away that money in case there's something that happens. Things that can happen, wars, depressions, pandemics, all of this sort of thing. And what he does also is he spends a lot of time going through the 50s right up to present day, talking about Europe and the United States in particular, and the different things that have been done by different presidents, etc., in order to stave off a recession, bail out companies, and all of this sort of thing. And he provides some pretty decent evidence that as we've gone further and further in trying to protect the economy and protect corporations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what ends up happening is that the more central banks and perhaps the government does, the more money starts to flow into the direction of the people that already have money, and then we end up with a situation where we have today, where the distance between the wealthy and the working class, it's such a gulf. And also why there are so many billionaires suddenly. Because you might be confused with the world and you look at these people that are absolute morons, but they're billionaires, and everyone says, well, they must be a genius. Well, no, what actually happens is that because of government and Fed interference, making risky bets is more likely to pay off, and people know that. And so the people that often are not making smart bets somehow come out doing okay. There's a whole bunch of stuff about that. But, remember the savings and loans? You remember that? How about credit default swaps? Do you remember that? I'm sure you all remember the pandemic. I'm sure you all remember the dot-com bust. But yes, the book goes through all those periods and how things have changed. How philosophically governments and the Fed, for example, how their philosophies have changed and how they interfere. And it looks at, if you're talking about the United States, both Republicans and Democrats. There's talk about, some of the stuff that Kennedy did, where he was the first person to do these things, and how I don't want to just give away the whole book, but some of it was surprising to me. I didn't know some of this stuff. So for example, cutting taxes versus spending more money. seems to take us into the same direction. So you've got both the Democrats and the Republicans doing things that are making this gulf larger and larger and larger. And there's some very interesting stories in there. I've been witnessing and complaining about this for quite some time now. And what really drew my ire was when in Canada, we did not have that real estate crash that the United States had. Right? We kind of had a little dip and then went on our merry way and continued for the next, 15 years or so, without any real problems in real estate. And we had governments that were hell-bent on protecting not just the current value of real estate, but protecting the increasing value of real estate. And a lot of things were done in order to buttress that. And the reason they were doing it, and Trudeau said this himself, he said that the baby boomers have their nest egg all in real estate. We can't allow real estate to fail. And as a result, so this is government intervention, right? When you hear something like that, you know there has been government intervention. And what this has created in Canada is a huge gulf between baby boomers and everyone that came after them. And the further, the later on you came, the worse your life is. You will never own a home. We are at a place now, both in the United States and in Canada, where it seems like it's almost impossible to have children. One of the entire points of life, right? Not that everyone has to have children. I have arguments for and against. But when you have societies where it is so expensive to survive that it doesn't make sense to have children, you have failed. So we have completely failed. And now we have this trade war. And Trump is in the United States. What's he doing? He's going back to the same old garbage that creates all these problems, massive tax cuts. I heard the other day that a household that brings in over $200,000 could be getting $14,000 in tax cuts. Why? Well, this is going to spur on the economy. Yeah, it's going to create the same problem we already have. It's going to make it even worse. What's happening now in the United States is that they are relying on the upper class to continue spending in order to keep the economy going. But the economy that they're talking about is actually the stock market. That is their main focus. The Main Street is being demolished by Trump's policies. Border towns are being demolished. Farmers are being demolished. The only thing they care about, well, there's two things they care about: the stock market and the bond market. They don't care about anything else. So people's lives are getting worse and worse and worse. These tax cuts are not going to help the working class at all. And the gulf between the rich and the poor is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. They're just continuing the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you're listening to the Democrats who want to spend, or if you're talking to the Republicans who want to cut taxes. Either way, you're heading in the same direction. And, I'm not even talking about the debt, right? Which eventually is going to hit a wall, right? So all of that is very interesting, and everyone knows my opinion about real estate. I think it's an absolute joke, and that the government should have started putting taxes on all real estate transfers a long time ago, and they could have gotten rid of this problem. But they don't have the guts. And everyone I ever talked to back then said I was insane. Well, look where we are now. For some people, it's great. You've got a house that you've taken out maybe $500,000 out of your house piggy bank. Everything's going fine until it isn't. And of course, let's not forget this. This has also driven up rents in a way, which is even too complicated for me to understand. But when your rents get to the point where people can't afford food anymore when they're trying to start their life off, it's disgusting. But something that surprised me in the book, and I have a little bit of insight into this, and so I thought I would talk about it, was that in the modern computer era, and I didn't know this, but I should have, and it shouldn't be a surprise. In the modern era, computers and companies that use computers quite a bit, right? Productivity is down. Productivity is down. And the thing is, everyone talks about, well, now in Canada, we have a huge productivity issue, right? And a lot of people say, well, more computers, get computers in there, high tech, that's what it's all about. But that productivity is on the wane. And something that he mentioned, which I laugh about, was the poor management of these companies. For example, if you work in high tech, I know that you have to do your performance reviews, right? And your manager, who might have 2 or 3 teams reporting to him in some of these companies, has to do a performance review for all of these people, right? And it is time consuming. It is hugely time consuming. And what is the purpose of it? Well, it turns out the purpose of it doesn't exist, because now we're having huge layoffs. And I know that no one's going through any of the performance reviews that they have on record over the last 5 and 10 years. They're not going to be laying people off, even when they say they're laying off based on performance. They're not laying off based on performance. Not from these performance reviews. You might have a manager who is told you have to get rid of your bottom 20%. Well, it's going to be the people he doesn't like then. Doesn't matter if that person performs or not. I don't like this person. He's a pain in the ass, right? But mostly the reasons why someone's laid off is nebulous, and these things have not helped. So there's been no reason for this. But another thing that has happened, and I remember not liking this a long time ago. So all of my early work on computer systems, I actually had a dumb terminal at worst, and virtual terminals. So if you had Linux, you can have like several virtual terminals. It's only text, right? It's only text. It's a command line. And that was the most productive time for me, okay, for getting things done. Now, I'll have a caveat near the end of all of this. But why was it? Well, it's because you're just stuck in that environment where you're doing work. So if you get bored, you pick up another ticket and you work on that problem, right? And what we have now are huge graphical interfaces. And if you're working even as a developer or a programmer, you're constantly going into something like Jira and so many other things. And you've got web browsers with like 20, I see, you have the Zoom calls or whatever, or Teams calls, and you see these people have like 40 or 50 tabs open, right? Because there's all this crap that they have to go through on the daily. What about Agile, right? What about all the meetings you have every single day where you're reporting on things that no one cares about, right? What about the work that you are given? I'm a Unix guy. When I started at the last place that I worked at, I had only 2 requirements. I said, I don't work on Windows machines because it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of yours as well. And I don't have to wear a suit. And they were like, that's fine. And that all went on. But, companies change. By the end of it, I was spending almost all my time on Windows. Why? Why would you want me? Boy, I learned more about Active Directory than I cared to know. And I dislike it even more than I thought I would. But in some ways, it was fine. But my point is, we don't know how to manage people, right? We have all these requirements for the things we have to do because everyone does it. So, we have a new thing. Okay, put it in AWS, get, Terraform, get Kubernetes on that. We need all this stuff. For what? For something that maybe has 100, 200 containers running, right? That's a business-to-business model, so it doesn't have huge fluctuations. Sure, I guess so. And then you have developers sitting there screwing around with Kubernetes, These are coders that are supposed to be doing the creative work for you, wasting their time doing this. Why? Because it's the trend. And so all the decisions are made at the upper levels now. And they think they're so smart because they make a lot of money and they have a C, they're part of the C suite, but they don't know anything other than fear. That's why they do all these things. It's like, we don't want to be responsible, put it in AWS, and I don't want to deal with it. So my point is this: we've got all these companies that are really just consumers of AWS, and a large portion of their money is actually going to their competitor, AWS. Their employees are spending all their time in AWS instead of doing the creative work that they're supposed to be doing, right? This is opinion. This is just opinion. But we can't change the fact, and I am shocked, and you can read the book, that productivity is low when it comes to high tech. And that could be why all of these companies are hyper-focused on AI, because they believe it's going to deliver the productivity. I do not believe it's going to deliver the productivity that they're looking for. What they actually need to do is focus on delivering at a low cost. I have not seen any company that talks about, as far as like high-tech companies lately, talking about, we are going to deliver what the customer wants at a low cost. I don't see that. I see them spending trillions and trillions of dollars instead. And so the productivity is garbage right now. If you look at the expense of running these companies, okay, what is the output? Let's say it this: what is the profit per employee? Well, it's going down the drain, right? And they try to hide it by, for example, renting data center space instead of selling bonds to create their own data center, for example, right? It's all a big lie, and productivity is in the garbage. Now, I think I was saying earlier that Canada, our GDP, we're hovering around zero growth. But in the United States, most of the GDP growth is coming from the Magnificent Seven and all of their investments in each other. So who knows how that's going to turn out. But anyway, the point is, I'm going to have to go through the end of this book again to try to see what the recommendations are for getting out of this rut that we are in. I think that one thing for sure is that allowing some things to fail is definitely an option that we want to look at, no matter how hard that's going to be, because we have avoided letting things fail for so long, like in Canada with the housing market, for example, and prices are still so stubborn here. It makes no sense. But until we allow some things to fail and to weed out, zombie companies and companies that are not profitable, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, nothing's going to change. And if we continue to do bailouts and to have the government goose, essentially, the economy, that's just going to make the wealthy wealthier. And all these wealthy people are walking around, they've brainwashed themselves into thinking that they are incredible geniuses, when in reality it is a completely flawed economic system with so much government intervention that has made them wealthy. And then they also cry the government shouldn't interfere so much. Well, if the government hadn't interfered, nobody would know who you are. A lot of these people, right? Because your companies were garbage, but when there's so much money just how would you say it, splashing around, it's got to go somewhere. And even when you were making bad decisions and your company wasn't profitable, it was going into your stocks anyway. So shut up and get a grip. You are not a genius. Okay? Much like myself, I did, well, my life could have been a lot worse, but I was at the right place at the right time. That's really what it was. And I worked hard and I had an interest in it. That's really what it comes down to. But we have to get back to providing hope to people. The hope that I had when I started out. And I have no hope right now because I see the way employees are treated in high tech right now. And I do not believe in it. There's absolutely no hope. I don't know why anyone would get into it. And I'm seeing this, like the negative attitude about work is becoming very, very, very common. And there was a time when it was a very, very positive thing, you know? And I don't see a lot of that right now. But anyway, for me, in my little computer room here, I'm focusing on the technology and ignoring the idiots. That's, I think, really the best, the only thing we can do. But the people at the top that are in control, they have to deal with this mess that gets worse and worse and worse. Trump is certainly not helping. And yeah, I guess that's the end of the message. Read the book and decide what you think should be done to save, I don't know, Western democracies. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.